drivers, but at any rate, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So first off, some good news is it does appear that the Hurricane Center has come down a little bit in their forecast intensity at landfall. They're now showing it making landfall at 105 miles per hour, which is a high-end Category 2 hurricane. Still worth mentioning, however, that intensity errors at this point in time tend to average about 10 to 15 miles per hour. So a low-end Category 3 isn't out of the question, though of course it could even be weaker than that. But nevertheless, the Hurricane Center has come down. In their latest discussion, they do mention one concern they have is that despite the weakening, they're saying that the hurricane's wind field is forecast to expand, which will increase the surge and wind threats. Of course, the surge is primarily a coastal problem. That shouldn't cause any issues in Lafayette or Baton Rouge or anything like that. But it will be a larger hurricane than, say, Hurricane Laura was. Hurricane Laura had a really tight, compact wind field. This will be a much more expansive hurricane. Speaking of, we'll go ahead and look at the satellite view. Now, the sun is setting on Hurricane Delta, so the image kind of goes away, but note it is already a very large hurricane here. Just from the looks of it, I mean, you already have clouds associated with it approaching the coast of Louisiana, even though the center is still just off the Yucatan Peninsula. Switch this over to infrared so we can see with the sun going down kind of what it looks like here. So here's your infrared view. It looks a little bit ragged right now. I think it looks like going over the Yucatan Peninsula did take a little bit of a toll on the system. Not a lot of lightning in the inner core. In fact, we don't even see much of an eye on here right now, so it has definitely weakened quite a bit. But it will have a day or two over warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico to pick back up some intensity. But then as it gets close to the Louisiana coast, we're expecting some weakening as it runs into some cooler waters near the continental shelf, as well as some increasing wind shear from an approaching upper-level jet stream. So right now, I'm getting reasonably confident we're not looking at something really high-end like a Cat 4 or 5 type situation, not like a Hurricane Laura, but we could still be looking at a good Category 2, Category 3 hurricane, so less a Laura or, Hurricane Harvey type situation, but could still be looking at something more similar to, say, Hurricane Ike or Gustav or Rita, so still a formidable storm, even if not, the most intense hurricane in the world. So going to some of the Hurricane Center graphics, and sorry if I'm moving along kind of quick, because like I said, I actually have someone on the way over here, so I'm on short time. But anyway, here's what the wind probabilities look like. So Lafayette very much in the high-end tropical storm wind probabilities, even Baton Rouge in the over 50% probability for tropical storm force winds owing to the large size of the storm. Then looking at the hurricane wind probabilities, about 30 to 40% or so for Lafayette, which doesn't sound like a lot, but for a hurricane that's still 2 days away, where there's some substantial uncertainty with regards to both track and intensity, that's not an insignificant probability there. Looking at your more traditional cone graphic, here they have the center making landfall around Intracoastal City, maybe a little to the west of Intracoastal City, which is about where they had it this morning, maybe a hair to the west. Based on the normal track errors, basically anywhere from Morgan City to about Cameron is probably fair game for the center to make landfall. The model tracks are getting pretty tightly clustered, that it will be somewhere, I'm thinking you could probably even narrow it down to between Vermilion Bay and Cameron at this point, personally. So Lafayette definitely going to be on the right side of this one. It doesn't look like, I would be pretty surprised if it went much further east, like over towards, say, New Orleans. It could still track a little further west, but the thing is, again, this is going to be a large hurricane at landfall, so even if it's similar in track to, say, Hurricane Laura over towards Lake Charles, just because the large wind field, Lafayette is almost certainly going to get some impacts from this. In terms of how much impacts, it'll obviously depend on where the center makes landfall exactly, but we can look at some model data to give us a better idea of that. So here's the GFS model, which is one that the Hurricane Center seems to be thinking is doing a good job with this, as it did for Hurricane Laura. Historically, the GFS was a little inferior to the European model, though I personally believe that gets overstated sometimes. But the GFS has actually gone through a series of upgrades and has been doing pretty well this season so far. So don't be fooled. It looks like the center is going way to the west, but notice how it recurves back towards Louisiana. So it's not impossible that the storm gets as far west as, say, the same longitude as like Beaumont or something before it curves back. This might be just a hair to the west of where the Hurricane Center track is. But there you go. That's landfall right there. This is Friday evening, 0Z. That's about 6 p.m. Friday right there. So this is late Friday. And then that's midnight. So that's another thing, is this thing's going to be accelerating. So we're not looking at like long-lasting impacts. I mean, here it is by Saturday morning. The center of it's, practically over Monroe. Things settling down. So it looks like it's going to just be kind of a quick thing Friday night there. These winds right here, this shows about Category 1 winds, but the GFS, keep in mind its resolution isn't high enough to really catch some of those inner core details, so that could be a little underdone. To get a closer look at that, I can switch over to one of the higher resolution models where this is coming into its range now. So that's a look of what the simulated radar looks like. There's landfall kind of around that Cameron-Vermilion Parish line again. And then, oh, and the timing on this, by the way, this is, once again, this is about 7, 8 o'clock Friday evening. And the model only runs through midnight Saturday morning here. So, but you can see it goes from the coast to north of Lafayette in just a few hours, in about 6 hours. There with this backside pretty open. So that's another good news. I don't think this is going to be an extraordinary rainmaker or anything. Let me take a quick look at the wind gusts here. So looking at those, this is model forecast wind gusts, and anywhere you have the yellow is basically hurricane force gusts. So I mean, even for Lafayette, I mean, even if we're looking at, say, landfalls around a Category 1 intensity or so, I mean, this is showing wind gusts to over 75 miles per hour here. So that would be similar to maybe what Lafayette got during Hurricane Lily, maybe even a little more so. Maybe somewhere in kind of that Hurricane Lily, Hurricane Gustav kind of feel, where enough to blow down lots of trees. It doesn't really look, to be something devastating at this point. If you wanted to know in terms of reasonable worst-case scenario, you're probably looking at a low-end Category 3 hurricane, which would certainly be enough to do some major tree damage, lots of power outages. So that's kind of the thing I'm trying to stress, is even if we're not looking at, a repeat of Hurricane Laura with a, almost Category 5 hurricane, it's still going to be a very formidable storm capable of blowing trees down, blowing fences down, knocking out power outages for a very widespread area, especially given the size of the storm. There's going to be a lot of power outages with this. And you're going to, especially near and where the center makes landfall, I mean, you're going to be getting those wind gusts 70, 80 miles per hour, if not even a little higher than that. I mentioned the rainfall. I forgot to pull up the Hurricane Center rainfall graphic just so you can see what that looks like. And they're showing 6 to 10 inches near where the center makes landfall. And while it's going to be moving fast, you got to remember hurricanes are still very efficient rainfall producers. So even if it's moving quickly, 6 to 10 inches of rain is going to be pretty likely for some areas. But unlike, say, the 2016 event, we're not going to be looking at like 2 feet of rain or something like that. Maybe there's some pockets in here that get, a little over a foot of rain. But we're not looking at like a widespread devastating flood event. This storm's just going to be moving too fast for that. So that's definitely a lesser concern. To kind of wrap up here, here's what they have for the threats. They're saying potential for 74 to 110 mile per hour wind gusts in the red area. So that's, hurricane force winds. Anywhere there is possible. Of course, will it be this far west or this widespread? We'll have to wait and see. as the forecast because this graphic here is trying to take into account some uncertainty in the track and intensity. Storm surge going to be confined along the coast, but given the large size of it, pretty good potential for some significant surge around the Vermilion Bay area. Probably going to be a lot of coastal evacuations. There's the flooding rain potential. Some flooding will, by major flooding, they just mean flooding that's going to probably threaten some structures, just because you're going to have a lot of the surge as well as the heavy rain. But again, for Greater Lafayette, other than maybe some kind of usual suspect areas, I'm not really concerned about, like I said, a major flood event. Certainly not for the Lafayette area. And then, of course, tornadoes are always a potential for any landfalling storm. That's actually probably going to be a bigger threat over towards Baton Rouge and New Orleans. Tornadoes tend to be more of a concern on the periphery of a hurricane. And then finally, just to get into what the Hurricane Watch text from the the Weather Service over in Lake Charles has for Lafayette, we're showing peak winds of 55 to 70 with gusts to 85. That's kind of, their best guess of what to expect in terms of winds for Lafayette. And again, that's certainly going to be enough to blow over lots of large trees, fences blown over, large-scale power outages. Again, even if not something that's going to be devastating and destroying lots of homes, and all, with those trees coming down, it's going to damage some homes if if your house is unfortunate enough to be underneath one of those trees. The power line issues. Not expecting any surge flooding. Looking at 4 to 8 inches of rain locally, higher amount. So again, kind of around 6 inches would probably be my over/under estimate for Lafayette. Probably looking around 6 inches, maybe some spots getting closer to 10, but those being fairly isolated. And then again, you might have potential for some tornadoes, but I think that threat will be greater over towards the Baton Rouge area. And then just to pull up for Baton Rouge real quick on this forecast, I'm kind of running out of time here. See, they're pretty low-end tropical storm. East Baton Rouge Parish, they have a tropical storm watch saying 25 to 35 sustained with gusts to 45. That's even weaker than what Lafayette got for Hurricane Laura. So pretty much just kind of a gusty day for Baton Rouge, it looks like. 2 to 4 inches of rain. And again, you will have that potential for some tornadoes. So anyway, that's kind of all I had for tonight. So to recap, as of right now, I don't think we're looking at any, major devastating type hurricane situation, but certainly one that would be strong enough to, like I said, cause a lot of serious tree damage. If it blows on your house, obviously that's a big problem. Widespread power outages. But right now, I would probably place the over-under around that 100, 105 miles an hour at landfall, probably putting Lafayette close to sustained hurricane force winds by the time it got there, with gusts kind of in the 80 to 90 mile per hour range, which is kind of somewhere between, say, what Lafayette had in Lily in 2002 or maybe what Baton Rouge experienced for Hurricane Gustav in 2008. So again, that's all I had prepared for tonight. I'll try to do another one of these tomorrow evening. I'm going to shoot for around 5:30 tomorrow because I got something again in the evening tomorrow night, and we'll touch base again.